Isn't it great? As you can see, this was just a quiet night for Nigel. He's ready. If necessary, we have to be ready. How? Our final speaker, we'll come back to that, sir. Our final speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is another MP of great integrity, without question, the politest gentleman in the House of Commons. Without question, the best dressed gentleman in the House of Commons. And without question, the best spoken gentleman in the House of Commons, who has the record for using the longest word at a mere 28 letters. If he's on form and you're nice to him, he might practice it this evening. Before we welcome Jacob to the stage, let's just see him in action on the video.
These Conservatives say they want Britain out of the customs union and the single market.
But the Prime Minister must realise that under all constitutional norms, she ought to go and see the Queen urgently and resign. What we need is a leader who will say to the European Union, it is impossible to divide up the United Kingdom. It is impossible to agree to a situation where we have a perpetual customs union. It is impossible to pay £39 billion of taxpayers' money. But let's leave let's leave my despicability to one side, because what's important is to have the discussion. The United Kingdom Parliament, the most ancient democratic parliament in the world, has been made powerless.
Please welcome to the stage, Jacob Rees Mogg, MP.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for staying. You always think if you're the last one off, people will have headed to the bar by this stage in the evening, so I'm extremely flattered that you have restrained yourselves and will be going to one of Tim's pubs later. We know the basic facts, don't we? That the European Union is a failing economic model, and that the defeatist attitude of the British establishment is about managing decline. It essentially takes the view that the UK can never do as well as it did in the past, that our best days are behind us, and that all we can hope for is to shelter behind the EU's protectionist wall to keep out some of the globalist winds that will blow, and if we shelter, perhaps we will hold on to some level of prosperity. But when you look at the European Union, you see that this isn't actually true. That the winds have got through that wall, they're beginning to blow down that wall, and that so many European economies are failing, and that their institutions are failing with them. Just look at France. France, Paris, riots every week, people wearing yellow jackets, and they're not George Osborne, are taking to the streets week in, week out, in a great tradition of French opposition to the hierarchy. Look at Italy, rejecting the orders, the rules, the commands of Brussels. But of course you would if you were Italian reject it, because you've had no economic growth for 20 years. Your standard of living hasn't been getting any better. But if you're Greek, your standard of living has been crushed. Now we know all this, but we also know that actually the way to achieve prosperity is to have those key things that make a prosperous state. The rights of property, the rule of law, freedom of speech, and democracy. All of these are essential components of success. If you take a single one of them away, you find that the others are not protected. So free speech protects democracy. Democracy protects the rights of property. The rights of property are part of the rule of law. The four always come together. But in the European Union, one of them is taken away which undermines the other three. And that is the democratic issue. When you look at European competencies, there are things that as a member of parliament you can no longer do. You can no longer seek that ancient right of redress of grievance for your constituent when it relates to agriculture, or not applicable to my constituency, it's landlocked, or fishing, or whether it's to do with the regulations, or whether it's to do with rules affecting the city, or whether it's to do with tariffs. All of this, ladies and gentlemen, is outside your democratic control. It's been passed up to a higher authority. And we need to remind ourselves why this matters. Because here we are, we're 2 and a bit years in, and we're looking at 585 pages of text. 68 pages. Do you know what 68 pages do? They list one by one all the regulations that are going to apply to Sammy, but not to me. 68 pages. They just list them by number. They're not writing out all the regulations and think you're getting excited that it was only 68 pages of regulations. No. It's 68 pages naming and listing the regulations, which are thousands and thousands of pages when you turn to the regulations themselves. Now, that is an undemocratic way of approaching it, but it is also a distraction from why we wanted to leave. We wanted to leave because we think, ladies and gentlemen, that we can do things better for ourselves. We believe in our understanding of society and of political life. We believe that individuals coming together into communities form society, and that from that society we get a nation state, a government that has legitimacy because it relates to the people who founded it. We have a conception of parliamentary democracy and sovereignty where Parliament has authority not falling from it on high, but given to it, ladies and gentlemen, by each and every one of you for a 5-year term, returnable to you intact at the end of that 5-year term. We think that is how our society is created, how our nation is created, and that is where legitimacy lies. And that theory is great and powerful and important and inspires us because our nation's story is so intertwined with its development. But it's there for a purpose. It's not there because it's a good idea or because we've done it for hundreds of years. It's there because it leads to the most prosperous society that you can imagine. And we know that when we look around the world because we know that the societies that work best are the ones that have the systems that we have evolved, that they have in fact copied from us. We look at the United States, the richest country in the world, and we see that it is based on our governmental systems, the rights of property, the rule of law, freedom of speech, and democracy. And so we see historically that prosperity comes from these great things, from our core democratic values. And so when we look at leaving the European Union, we are banishing the idea of managing decline. We are saying instead that through our own efforts, through our willingness to be entrepreneurs, to have novel ideas, to take risks and to implement what we want to do, we can make the standard of living of the British people better. And then we can look at the details of how we do that. It's been quoted before, there is not a country in the world that has traded freely that has ever got less prosperous from doing so. Because we believe that we should put the consumer first and that the price of goods for the consumer should be lower. Why? Why don't we protect inefficient producers instead? Well, the reason is that if consumers have better value, they've got more money to spend on other things. They've got money that they can save, and that gets lent to business, encouraging more business. There is a virtuous circle that is created by reducing the costs of transactions, and the starting point is opening up to free trade by removing tariffs. But it goes further than that, because the EU is equally in this business of managing decline. And therefore, what it wants to do is to regulate to keep producers from the rest of the world out, to protect inefficient European producers. The regulations are not about health and safety. That is the excuse, the pretext for making lower-cost producers unable to sell into European markets. And that makes all of us less well off. It means our own producers have a full sense of security and a protection that is not in the end going to make them prosperous and successful. And that if we can therefore remove tariffs and remove non-tariff barriers, we open ourselves up to improving all our standards of living. But we free ourselves not just from those outward-facing barriers, but inwardly we can be more innovative and more successful. If you look at the regulations in my own area, in financial services, what do? They are making the City of London less efficient. Not less efficient than Frankfurt or Paris, which in this really don't matter, but less efficient than New York and Singapore and Hong Kong. For we must compete with the world, not just with the small, narrow, outdated European system. So we want to look at those internal regulations that are affecting us, not just the barriers to trading with the world. We need to look at the regulations that affect the 87% of businesses that don't trade with the European Union, yet have to follow the regulations as if they did. But ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, this is about whether or not you believe in yourselves. Do you think, as you sit here, that the decisions you make for yourselves will be better decisions than other people can make for you? Do you think that your economic decisions and your life decisions should be made by you or by these wise people on this panel? However good we are, you still make better decisions for yourselves and just think we could be European commissioners. You know that it is in your hands to succeed. We know it's in our nation's hands to succeed. We are taking this wonderful, this exciting, this generational opportunity to take back control, not because we simply believe it as a matter of dogma, but because we know it will make us more prosperous, stronger, and more successful in generations to come. That is the prize. It is so exciting in all the discussions on the 585 pages. Do not forget that taking back control is about doing things better, succeeding, and prospering. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming towards the end of our evening. Do you know we, Leave Means Leave, have hundreds of business owners and entrepreneurs who support our cause. They believe in Britain. The establishment of Britain do not believe in Britain. This is the problem we are facing. When I made my speech at the British Chamber's conference in March 2016 and said that Britain could do better off out, the first person to come up to me and shake my hand was the next speaker on stage. That person who said, "What a fantastic speech, how much do I agree with you," was one Jeremy Corbyn. The Conservative Party manifesto said very clearly that we would leave the single market, the customs union, and we would not any longer be under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. The Prime Minister has lied and lied and lied. But she did not have the wool pulled over her eyes by the European Union. She got the deal she wanted because she wants to remain in the customs union and remain close to Europe. Before we leave tonight, there's a few things I'd like you to do for me. The first thing I'd like you to do is thank our fantastic panel of speakers.
Always having each other. It's a bit like the Communist Party meetings in China, where they all sit there clapping each other.
Thank you. The second thing, which is also directed to the average of 100,000 people who watch these rallies live streamed at home, is to take the time to write to your MP and tell them that if they don't get us to leave on the 29th of March 2016, you will never vote for them again. 19.
But I hope they don't write to me, because I'm all right.
Yeah, Freudian slip. We should have been out 2 years ago. 2019. The third... All in good time. The third thing I would like you to do is to grab your banners, grab those things that are in front of you and on your seats, and stand up. Because I want us to send a very loud message to the cloth-eared people in Parliament.
I'm in Parliament. No, I'm not doing. I don't do.
What do we want?
Thank you.
Brexit! When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Brexit. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Brexit. When do we want it? Now. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and good night.
Thank you, John. Cheers, thank you.
2016.